Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior, accomplished, and respected corporate leader from Chennai, India, originally from Sri Lanka, Mr. Senthilnathan Shanmugam. Senthil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thanks for having me. Great to be in your show.
Thank you. Senthil is the Global Chief Executive Officer of EFL Global. So, Senthil, before we speak about your work at EFL Global, a few questions for you.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about your own journey and what were some of the biggest lessons from those early years that shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very secure, protected environment with high moral standards and discipline.
Yeah,
And in I grew up in Sri Lanka in a very quaint town, which is Kandy.
correct.
And coming from there, I didn't go to university. I went straight from school to join an organization as a management trainee at early stage. So, from that point, it was like a huge shift from where I came to this
Mm,
new world. I
yeah,
kind of lived with what can I say, a kind of nervousness of learning and understanding and fitting into that environment. And it did continue for a while I was trying to adapt and adjust to this.
mm,
And then over a period of time, um, a few years after that, sort of this nervousness even shifted to a kind of a paranoia, like living like a dichotomy between these two worlds that I was living in.
correct.
And at some point, I think in my late 20s, after a few years of experience and having observed, adapted, and learned from this, I sat down and I thought to myself, look, I need to come out of this. I cannot function this way. I
Correct.
would say this was the real paradigm shift when I really look back
Mm,
in reflecting on this condition of mind for the past 8, 9 years that I had experienced
mm,
and sort of emptying my mind and, literally writing it down and saying, okay, I will be, I'll be born again out of this,
very, very interesting.
scenario. And I think, Ashutosh, that would be my biggest takeaway, and that brought the shift in my entire working career. It was sort of graduation from where I was to where I am now, and then how do I look ahead?
Mm,
And at that moment, I also, by literally writing what was my experience, why am I feeling like this? I need to come out of this. It came out, I learned to write the process of my business, or
mm,
what I was doing.
yeah.
We come from a world of delivering all
Mm,
expectation
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
keeping your promise. And then you're dealing with this world which has complete, not in your control, but yet you have to deliver your expectation. That was sort of the culminating point. And from there onwards, there was no looking back. I took control of what I was doing and sort
Mm.
of adapted to that situation
And
and
as they
learned
say,
from
the
it.
rest is history.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Let's now move straight to EFL Global, Senthil. Tell me a little bit about EFL and what distinguishes the organization from other top logistics companies, especially in such a global landscape which is so competitive.
Yeah. We always take pride in saying this. The company is a 40-year history. It started in a very humble beginning in Sri Lanka
Mm,
with the gentleman who founded the organization was Hanif Yusuf, and I partnered him much later to co-found India, and then we built it together for a long time.
mm,
So we are a true multinational from Indian subcontinent, if you may
mm.
say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But what is at the core of our business, Ashutosh, our values is customer intimacy. We are so customer centric,
Yeah.
and we are very rooted in this value where your customer grows, you grow. Right. So everything that we, from our founding days, what we did was, if the customer says how high, jump, and we would say how high. That was the
Mm.
mantra, and we built the organization around that sort of feeling and those commitments. That's our DNA, and
Mm.
that literally, and it was not just scaling for the sake of scaling. It was scaling by following the customers. Our real story of growth came from our customers growing. Some of the
Mm.
brands that we dealt with in the early stages, how they grew, and literally our policy and the philosophy with which we worked
Mm.
helped us to grow with them. And then,
Mm.
we were largely in a retail supply chain business. So that was shifting. Sri Lanka went into apparel manufacturing in the early
Yeah.
80s. And then this landscape, I mean, kept shifting. So
Mm.
we kept growing with those changes.
Yeah.
That's
Well
the
said.
real
Well
core of
said.
our
Well
success.
said. And you know, when I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation, it
Yeah,
was fascinating to read this phrase that you believe in making the right partners in the right places with the right intent.
that's right.
How do you select the right partners for
So
new markets?
I know. So when you're if you when you have core values, or your deep philosophy and the way you want to function, if you don't have the right partners, if and your ecosystem will not function the
Correct.
way you want it to function.
Correct.
But finding, I mean, I'm a big believer, Stosh, in, not just communication, not just, on the phone or emails or anything like that. When we select people that matter to us, or who will be part of our supply chain, who will be part of our integral service, I really make it a point to go and see them, visit them, look at them in their own environment, and make that call,
Mm.
to see if this will fit us or not.
Mm.
And I also believe that when person to person contact, when you're in front, sitting with each other, in front of each other, there is that feeling and judgment. It comes with time and, experience.
Yeah.
And this is what has honestly helped me
Mm.
to get there. And then your intentions, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a strong believer of intention and being able to assess your partnership's intent. So
Mm.
if if you fail there straight away, I mean, like, so you need to have this fundamental, if it's part of your core value, make that process work right for you.
Mm.
So this is
Mm.
how
Great
it has
response.
been. And I mean,
Yeah.
having said that, out of 10 decisions, one might go wrong, but
Absolutely.
you learn from that. And
Absolutely. But
yeah,
so tell me, when you work with so many businesses and business owners,
yeah.
what are some of the common mistakes you have seen businesses make in managing supply chains? And how
Yeah.
do you support them?
The biggest uh, concern or convincing I have to, deal with, in explaining this to my customers and some other stakeholders, is not to be heavily rely on solutions that's totally cost centric.
Mm.
This is simply the biggest problem that I see. And secondly, being reactive and not proactive. And these are two aspects that really, it might be look very simple and trivial, but
Mm.
really that's what uh, causes problem or brings down a lot of people in our world. So I always advocate, give examples, and advocate sustainable long-term planning,
Mm.
and prepare. And especially now we are in
Yeah.
such a volatile
Yeah.
world. You need to be agile enough, but at the same time have your fundamentals right. So this is what we largely try to
Correct.
advocate,
Correct.
Ashutosh,
Well
when we are
said.
trying to, yeah, yeah,
Well said. But tell me, Senthil, with AI,
yeah,
automation, data analytics, which is completely reshaping your business, where
absolutely.
do you see the next big opportunity?
I think the biggest opportunity is in having a really data-based, fact-based predictability in supply chain.
Hmm.
Today, the supply chain has a number of issues. I mean, a lot of things we have
Sure.
evolved, the
Sure.
world has evolved with technology, but particularly the supply chain industry.
Hmm.
I always compare this business with kind of the logic, like banking business. You might wonder why I'm bringing
Hmm.
banking into
Hmm.
this process.
Hmm.
I mean, the logic is that to one transaction, there are so many details.
Hmm.
But if you take the banking, it's so evolved, and the standardization and evolvement is such, it's
Yeah.
still evolving, but at a very high level.
Hmm.
But we lack, the supply chain industry lacks standardization.
Hmm.
Still, there is different operating environment. The standards are not there.
Hmm.
I definitely see AI narrowing that gap
Hmm.
and bringing more predictable planning and predictable supply chain. This is the biggest change
Right.
that will
Right.
come. But there is a at a higher level, but there is also what we call in our day-to-day transactions, we have a transaction cost. I
Hmm.
see the repetitive tasks being, good or bad, it's going to be replaced by technology.
Correct.
So that transaction cost coming down is another advantage. But the
Correct.
bigger picture is in terms of planning and
Hmm.
forecasting.
Hmm. But also, what I have seen, and I remember when I founded Guardian Pharmacy, there weren't such highly developed supply chain organizations. But today, I find the amount of skills available in supply chains are incredible. And
Absolutely.
therefore, my question is, what trends are shaping customer expectations when it comes to supply chain services?
It's the key, I would say, is real-time data-centric information.
Hmm.
Supply chain in the past was sort of uh, not totally integrated.
Hmm.
Each pillar of supply chain, like you can carrier, transportation or customs brokerage, warehousing, all this is getting integrated now,
Hmm.
and the real time information, and especially in the industries like pharma, very temperature sensitive aspects. Today we have sensors for everything,
Hmm.
sensors for humidity, sensors for temperature, where it is. So this is the biggest change, and this will continue to evolve. So your secure transportation, real time information, apart from the managing the supply demand and the
Yeah.
rest of the planning.
Yeah.
I think this is the biggest shift. It has been happening. There has been a
Hmm.
lot of talk about it in the past. People do sell the solutions, but experiencing and seeing it really is only now it's really evolving.
Hmm.
This is the
Amazing.
biggest change I see.
Yeah, amazing. You also, when we started talking, you were telling me how EFL has emerged as as a multinational from South Asia. And I find India, South Asia is now beginning to play a role in the global supply chain. What is your perspective and how will our region uh, rebalance or support the global supply chain?
I think the region stands to benefit hugely, and I've seen that in the recent past, even in the last 5 years. We have had a lot of disruptions because of the some of the tariff barriers, the trade barriers that had cropped up, and we were moving towards a globalization for the past 20 years till
Yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah,
And now we are the entire process of the WTO agreements and everything is getting dismantled, and we are kind of going back to where we were. I mean,
yeah,
that's the way trade is evolving with
mm,
protectionism and all that.
yeah, yeah,
See, but then the region, our region, the South Asian region, particularly for us, because we have had a strong footprint in all these areas. I could say that we benefited immensely because of the China Plus sourcing, or like the fallout benefit of this South Asia, India evolved. I think the supply chain is going through a huge evolution. It's going to change.
Yeah,
The region is going to be very active, and it's also supported by a huge change in the consumer behavior in the region
correct.
itself. Although it's very gradual,
Hmm.
um, this is going to be the key theme of everything, and sourcing is going to get more and more spread across the region.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's exciting times ahead, although we
Absolutely.
see them as a somewhat of a challenge at times now.
Absolutely.
But overall, I think the region is going to be extremely active
Well
and
said.
be a huge source of supply area, for the globe.
I agree completely. But then the other perspective I wanted from you
Yeah.
was that given the amount of geopolitical uncertainty
Mhm.
that the whole world is going through, how is EFL and the industry preparing for this uncertainty?
Well, Ashutosh, there are two aspects to this. One is, I believe the first thing is, taking control of what you can manage, what is within your control,
Yeah.
right? So there is, in this environment, there is there cannot be any compromise on that, because the external factors are so volatile.
Hmm.
You have to, what is in your control, you cannot compromise. You have to have
Right.
all functionalities, all areas within your control
Right.
to be excelling. You
Hmm.
have to
Hmm.
be more than expected in those,
Correct.
and be agile, because that's how we adapt ourselves. Then
Hmm.
you can adapt to any changes that are happening.
Right.
So that's our policy, that's our mantra.
Hmm.
And I think this is what I would recommend for anybody. Within
Huh.
what is within your control,
Huh.
don't compromise. Be,
Hmm.
absolutely focused, and have that area perfectly under control.
Hmm.
And then learn for adaptability. It can
Hmm.
be, today we have number of changes going on, be it technology, currency, trade. We should be able to adapt to these
Correct.
changes and
Correct.
take. And also, when one window closes, another window opens. So you
Absolutely.
need to be aware which window is opening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How are you integrating, or how is EFL integrating sustainability and digitalization in your supply chain strategy?
Well, the technology, digitalization has helped us to sort of measure sustainability.
Hmm.
This is the biggest advantage that we have. Today, we have even most of the carriers, airlines, shipping lines, they are introducing carbon emissions, the measurability. So, a digital, landscape has really helped us to measure this.
Hmm.
And you need we sort of take sustainability as part of our work process, not
Right.
as a standalone initiative that we have to go out and do something. So in that sense, digitization has really benefited us, because we are able to
Hmm.
measure, we are able to track, we are able to really integrate that into
Hmm.
our work process. So that's been the story for us
Very
so
interesting.
far. And I
Very
think we will
interesting.
continue to evolve in that direction when
Ve-
the ecosystem adapts more digitization.
Very interesting. You have 2,900 or more than 2,900 employees globally. How do you maintain a unified culture and operational consistency across your whole organization?
Yeah, that's a tough one, but it's the value system that you have. Your
Right.
value system has to be universal. Your process has to be universal. There can be certain countries need certain deviation, but that's
Hmm.
allowed. But largely, we operate under one kind of process, a unified process. The value of common goals are, and the value is uniform to all countries.
Hmm.
And based on that, we drive the language, the internal communication. It is one. This is how we transform. But strangely, if you have the right methodology and the right messaging, it can get infectious. I
Hmm.
mean, people adapt that. Good things are easily adapted.
Correct.
So that's been our, if I'm to, think about it, that's been our key success.
Hmm.
And that's how we sort of keep the whole team together. Apart from, constant
Correct.
interactions and meetings and so
Absolutely.
on that we have, the social aspect that we give importance to. But the core of it is the value system that we bring and
Very
the
interesting.
processes.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. I have time for two more questions for you.
Yeah.
With over 3 decades of experience, what leadership qualities do you believe are the most important in the logistics and supply chain sector today?
I think this changing environment,
Hmm.
the leaders have to have a fair balance between technology, data-driven decisions, and human judgment.
Hmm.
This combination, getting a fair balance on this and awareness of technology and the changing in landscape, both of these are very important. I mean, whether we like it or not, execution, physical execution, and technology gap has to come down. Today,
Hmm.
I see a lot of, there are great examples of companies who have got phenomenal technology,
Yeah.
their execution is terrible.
Hmm.
Or companies who are, executing beautifully and they have had a long history, but the technology is missing.
Correct.
So this if whoever comes together, marries this process together
Hmm.
very well, is definitely will be successful because it's a very fragmented industry.
Correct.
The number one in the whole world, the group only controls 7% of the market share.
Hmm. Wow.
Just imagine, right? So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
opportunity out
Yeah.
there. But
Absolutely.
this is the key here. The balance is very, very critical,
Very
and
interesting.
that's going to influence the change and progress. Yeah,
Very interesting. And my last question for you, Senthil.
yeah,
You play an active role in community development and spiritual service.
yeah.
How has spirituality influenced your leadership and decision making?
Well, I'm very, very fortunate because my childhood and growing up in Sri Lanka back in Kandy, my family or we had my father was part of he was a trustee to an interfaith center where we had a Himalayan master.
Hmm.
My growing up was with him, right? Eventually, he became a huge guru. He was someone who spread yoga in America, and he was even he inaugurated the Woodstock Festival. But he was
Hmm.
like a grandfather to me when I was growing up, you
Wow.
know.
Hmm.
So I think my what I learned from, I mean, for bulk, good part of my life after that, I forgot, and I had a parallel life. But it's somewhere, when you're growing up, you stop and think, hey, what's happening here? You need to
Go back.
recalibrate
Yeah.
and adapt those
Absolutely.
learnings, and they come into use. So, the a culmination of all that I could say is knowing you. I mean, I also apply this in my management. If I
Hmm.
know me, if I don't know me, I have
Yeah.
no ability to understand you. So,
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
it's all about going in. But somewhere down the line, this has really rooted me in dealing with all kinds of circumstances and challenges, and it has given me drawing ability to draw the strength from within
Hmm.
to manage all these aspects. So this is the key that formative stage, huge gap after that, then going back looking for it, and learning that knowledge I already had, but
Hmm. Hmm.
didn't practice. This summer gave me sort of a mindset and a conditioning of giving back, and also at the same time applying these lessons in my day-to-day work. I mean, it's as simple as that,
Absolutely.
Ashutosh. This has been the uh, core of my strength.
Absolutely. And on
Yeah,
that note,
yeah.
Senthil, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this one has been with
Thank
you.
you.
I mean, thank you for talking to me about your own incredible journey.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking about EFL and how you have built this company over the last 3.5 decades into the global powerhouse that it is today. Thank you for sharing with me your own thoughts, your own principles. Clearly, what you are doing seems to be working beautifully for all your 3,000 odd employees and in a sector which is probably at the forefront of growth and technology today.
Yeah.
Thank you again for speaking to me and good luck.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you for the honor and the opportunity.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.